Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Real View podcast. I am your host, Allison Wiley. Joining me today is Ron Oney. He is owner of Empire Real Estate Solutions and president of Ohio Coalition of Appraisal Professionals. Ron, welcome onto the show. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
And we are going to dive into the world of appraisals, what consumers need to know, what realtors need to know. Ron's going to share with us his experience and knowledge of being in this industry and just prepare us for what we need to know, how we can all work together to make our home transactions successful. But before we get started in today's conversation, I would like to know a little bit more about you, Ron. Could you tell us about yourself and how you got started in the industry?
Wow. So the one thing I love about real estate in general is how so many people come from different backgrounds, right? And I'm no different. I've got a bachelor's in nuclear engineering. I've got a master's in health physics, and I own a real estate appraisal company, right? So it's one of those old jokes. So back in 2003, I think it was, when we started the company, I was looking to get out of the rat race. I wanted to get out of corporate America. I had worked for large companies like Accenture running SAP systems. And at the time, I was working for Xerox Global Services, running their global data warehousing for big, large companies for data warehousing. So I wanted to get out of the rat race. I had worked, at times, long hours in the middle of the night. Wife at one point said, are you really happy? And someone came to me with an opportunity talking about real estate and appraisal, and one of the things they were hoping to really fix. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of a techie. Maybe there's some things we can do there to help improve efficiencies, improve how things are done. So that's how it all kind of started way back, and haven't left.
And you never saw yourself going this route. It's always fun when I ask people this question because everyone has a different response.
Yeah. So when I tell people, what's your degree? Nuclear engineering. It's like, what? Yeah.
Do you use any of that in like what you do now?
Oh, not now, naturally.
Yeah.
But I did work at a facility in Dayton. I was an internal dosimetrist, so I was calculating radiation doses that workers were getting, an old bomb plant up there. So, yeah, I did use that at one point, but not for a long, long time.
Yeah. Now it's just living in the world of real estate with all of us.
Exactly.
All of us
Exactly.
other crazy realtors. Well, cool. Thanks for sharing a little bit more, about you, about yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do at Empire Real Estate Solutions and your work that you guys do there.
So we started Empire Real Estate Solutions back in, I think it's, like I said a little bit ago, September 2003. And we start out with just a couple of, one appraiser really. At the time, I wasn't even an appraiser at the time when we started it. And since then, we've grown it to, I think we got about 10 appraisers between Cincinnati, Dayton, and Columbus. And so I'd say 95% of what we do is bank-related mortgage work. We do naturally also do a little bit of divorce. There's situations where people are going through other situations that an appraisal is also required. So yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah, no, I love that. So very familiar with our Ohio community, kind of that southwest area of the state, sounds like. And also president of the Ohio Coalition of Appraisal Professionals, which I had the pleasure of meeting with you guys, I think, at the end of last year, just to learn a little bit more about you, what you guys do, how we can support you here at Ohio Realtors. Give us a little insight into that coalition, the work you guys do, and tell us a little bit about that.
So the OCAP, Ohio Coalition of Appraisal Professionals, if you recall back during the Great recession, as they called it, a lot of it really had to do with real estate, right? And there were a lot of new regulations and everything else was coming out. I don't know if you recall what it was called HVCC. That was Andrew Cuomo's pet baby. He was the attorney general at the time of New York. So that's where they were really trying to say, okay, anybody that is making money off of a mortgage loan, we can't have them talking to appraisers. They really were trying to create that divide between appraisers and having any of that peer pressure, not even peer pressure, but pressure to make a number, things like that. So that's when different appraisal organizations started popping up. We're like, hey, something's not quite right here. We need to be able to talk about this stuff. And appraisers in general, very mom and pop type industry, right? I've got one of the larger ones in the state, but it's still only 10 or so employees, right? And we tend to be very hold on to our own stuff. We don't like to talk to other appraisers because they're my clients, and we're always worried about that kind of stuff. So, but at that point, appraisers started finally coming and talking to each other. We had some groups all around the state. One was in Cincinnati. It was called the Appraisal Group of Cincinnati, and we were meeting at a Perkins, and we'd get 30 or 40 appraisers together to start talking. But that was happening all across the state in different locations. So at one point, there was a group of these like-minded coalitions or groups around the state started to talk and say, we could probably make a bigger impact if we joined forces. So back in 2008, I think it was, actually early 2009 is when OCAP officially was started. And that kind of brought together some of those smaller groups around the state to create a larger coalition. So what we do is our tagline is appraisers helping appraisers. And that's really what we want to do. It's everything from education events, like we have our summer seminar coming up here in June, where we bring some of the biggest names from Fannie, Freddie, you name it, across the entire spectrum. We have Superintendent Hawk will be there talking as well. So that's something we do every year, as well as helping appraisers be aware of all these changes that are coming down the pike that are hitting our industry fast and furious at this point, to be perfectly honest. So that's what we do. We try to help appraisers make sure we're all aware. And the relationship we've been able to build with the state and the state board itself, anytime there is something that actually affects appraisers, we get emails. The directors within OCAP get email from Ed Woodruff, general counsel for Ohio, and he asks for our input. So to have a seat at the table and to be able to give good input, make sure that appraisers are being protected and at least their voice is being heard is an important step for us, and we're happy to be able to do that for them.
Yeah, it's really great, what you guys have put together. And you guys are really similar, like with the realtors, where like we're all in competition, like with ourselves, So having
Yep.
these, opportunities to come together and say, like, hey, yes, you're my competition, but we're also, there's enough business to go around for all of us. And, we are stronger when we're coming together and working together. And that's when you can really get things accomplished and move the industry forward. So I think, you're very similar to the realtors in the sense that like, you have to kind of just say, yeah, we're working together on this. And that's a great thing about coalitions and associations is, it provides such that value. Like you said, you're able to stay up on changes in the industry, know the latest of what's going on, working closely with the division, which is, something we try to do here at Ohio Realtors too. It sounds like you guys are coming at it with the right mindset and are offering a really nice value to your other members of that coalition.
Absolutely. It's very important to have that voice at the state level to make sure that appraisers' voices are being heard.
Yeah, and I love your relationship, with the state too. I don't know if many people know what your involvement is, like with the division and things like that, especially for our members. Walk us through a little bit about what that relationship is like, and how you've been able to kind of make progress and be, in close quarters with them.
Yeah. So over the last several years, well, one, we've had members of OCAP become board members within the state. So we've had, let's see, our Guy Wesselkamper was a board member. He served 2 terms. Currently, Ernie is now a board member. We've had Beth Sig in the past. So we've just developed that relationship over several years. Even before Superintendent Hawk, we had great relationship with Ann Pettit. So it's just really grown over time. So anytime that there is something that comes up, Ed Woodruff, the general counsel for the board, sends us a note and says, "Hey, what do you guys think?" And then we'll formulate a response and send that back. And like I said, it's a good thing to be able to have that seat at the table.
Yep, definitely super important. We appreciate that and respect that too. And you mentioned, just the amount of changes that happen, in working in this industry, working as realtors, working in appraisers. Are you guys, getting the sense that things are just changing so fast, or what changes have you seen lately, that maybe we should be aware of, or, talk to us a little bit about some of the things we should be aware of that's going on in the industry?
So in the last few years, I'll kind of go through some of the things that have already happened and then maybe talk a little bit about the stuff that is coming. Some of the stuff that has happened in the recent past, I don't know if people know about the ANSI standard that all the appraisers have to adhere to if it's going to be a Fannie or Freddie loan. So if it's FHA, that's not necessarily the case, or VA, not necessarily the case, but 70-80% of the loans are Fannie and Freddie that go out. So anytime 1 inch, literally 1 inch of the back of a house below grade, that whole floor is considered below grade. That's kind of crazy, right? When I look at it, functionally, utility, the whole bit, right? I feel like that is above grade. A lot of agents believe that, you might have a walkout basement and with a window, and that's considered GLA. Well, it's not. And we have to adhere to this new standard that's required us to make a lot of changes, especially with Cape Cods. Half the area above in the Cape Cod, half the area has to be at least 7 foot, and we can only measure down to 5 feet. So, if you have these sloped roofs that cause problems for us, then we can't call it GLA. And that has caused a lot of misconceptions, people reading the reports incorrectly, not understanding why we're doing what we're doing, or just understanding how to read an appraisal report in general. There might be a bathroom in the basement, and they're like, "Hey, you missed a bathroom." We didn't. It's actually in the basement. It's on that next line right below. So that kind of information. Now, what is coming pretty soon is the UAD 3.6. With UAD, sorry, I'm using all these acronyms, Uniform Appraisal Data Set, something that Fannie and Freddie use to basically create a huge data warehouse and create their own models based on our data. So the new form is going to require us to do a lot of additional steps while we're actually at the property. Things that are, to me, a little bit crazy. We're going to have to measure the distance at the stoop. So literally, how far is that stoop, that concrete piece right as you walk in, how far is that above the ground? Is that 5 inches, 10 inches? And I don't know how much of a difference that really makes in a particular loan, but those are additional things that we're going to be required to do. Right now, we have to say this quality of construction and condition of all the entire property as a whole, but we're going to have to do that on a room by room basis. So we'll have to go in each room and talk about the quality and condition of each room, because you might have a kitchen that is C3 or C2, it's recently been redone with higher quality stuff, but, the bathrooms are still 15, 20, 30 years old. So those are things that they're changing on us that is going to require us to take quite a bit more time while we're there. Now, that's all going to be rolling out in the next year. By the end of this year, they're going to start doing a soft rollout, and by early next year, it's going to be full go. So that is going to take quite a bit more time for appraisers, even after they get through that first stage where you're learning how to do something new. Even after we get past that stage, that inspection time is going to increase significantly, which is, of course, going to change fees and everything else as well, unfortunately.
This episode of The Real View is brought to you by the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. Ohio's network of community colleges provides accessible training that accommodates the busy lifestyles of aspiring real estate professionals at half the price of a traditional university. With convenient locations in every part of the state, as well as online options, Ohio's community colleges are your smart choice for pre-licensing education. For more details or to start the journey to a real estate career, visit the education page at ohiorealtors.org and then click on the pre-license course locations.
Yeah, so no, I think that that's super important to know. That's a lot of good things to take into consideration, both from, a realtor perspective and a consumer perspective. How can we best kind of prepare? Like from the realtor side, I know you guys are obviously preparing for these changes and you're going to have a plan, once this rolls out at the later of the end of the year and into next. But what do we need to do as realtors and as consumers to prepare for these changes?
Well, I would say there's a few things. In Cincinnati, I know Cuba Casa is being started to be rolled out. I don't know if in Columbus and other communities, I know they're starting to use it. That kind of information, if it's being used and they do the full floor plan, that will help immensely. Fannie and Freddie are starting to use the desktops a little bit more. Some appraisers will do them, some won't. But anytime we can get more information, the better. Now, that inspection piece for us, when we go out, I don't know that there's anything specific that you'll be able to do, and nothing that will be able to set us up. But anytime we can get more information about updates, about all the stuff that's been done to the house in the last 15 years is really, really very helpful. For me, anytime I get information from an agent, I'm always looking at it. I hear from some agents, well, some appraisers don't like to see this information. Most of us do. Most of us like to get all of that information. There might be an appraiser out there that's like, I'm going to do all my own stuff. But let me just tell you, I like talking to agents. I like getting information from them. It helps me understand why things were priced the way they were. I've definitely had situations where, I've got something in a neighborhood that's close by. It looks to me very similar, but there might be something I'm missing. I'll call that agent and say, why was this house a little different than that one? And frequently I'll get a good answer. And that helps me understand why the market was doing what it was doing. Just having that kind of information and being willing to talk to appraisers, getting us the information when, across the state, it's a big one. It has to go in every single one of our reports, but concessions. In Cincinnati, now we have a yes or a no. And a lot of times people won't even put the numbers, but then we have to contact each one of those agents and get that information. If we don't get it, sometimes that slows down that appraisal process, which once again, everybody wants that to be faster and faster. That's part of why the UAD and everything else that's being rolling out is to speed up this process. And they want to get paid. If we want to close all these loans too, let me tell you. And at the end of the day, something I tell all agents is we don't want to see any loan fall through. We don't. We want to see every deal. That deal that sets the new bar in a particular neighborhood is my next comp, right? It's going to help me prove the next one. So I want to see every one of them go through. Now I have to be able to prove it with data, right? I have to be able to show why it's there, and underwriters are sticklers for that. So it's a balancing act for us for wanting to see things work, but then also being able to prove it mathematically with data. And that's definitely been a big push by Fannie and Freddie. You might start seeing a lot more graphs, I should say, and appraisal reports showing market data. How did we get a price per square foot adjustment within that range and things like that. So there's a lot more going on, using regression and things like that on the back end of what we do. We're not just throwing numbers in. People used to have the rules of thumb and things like that, but we have to have hard data for all of this. And it takes time to come up with all that.
Yeah, I think that's key to kind of note, you know what I mean? Like you guys are all working on the same team. You all want to get someone in a home or someone to their dream home, right? That's the goal, I think, for everyone.
Yeah.
And yeah, when we're all coming at it from a perspective of teamwork and like, hey, we're all on the same team here. Like, let's all do our jobs to get to the end goal, to get our clients, the house that they want and the financial side of things to go through in the way that we want. I think that's very important to know that we're all on the same team.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And so you mentioned a little bit about just the relationship with a realtor and working with them. Any other tips on how realtors can do a better job, or, really great ways that we can work with appraisers? Any other bits of advice and how we can really strengthen that relationship and make sure it's in a really good shape when we head to do a deal?
Communication is, once again, by far the most important thing. Up front, if you know it's going to be a tough one and there was some reason that this particular house is selling where it is, then let us know. Say, hey, we had 5 offers above list. This is what happened. This particular house has this. We were talking to the people that came through, and this is the thing that everybody latched on to. Whatever it may be, it helps us understand why the market's doing what it's doing. There are pieces of information within, I know at least our MLS, that we really, really struggle with. Things like rents on multifamilies. And once again, Fannie and Freddie getting very much sticklers on this stuff. If we don't have verified rental information, they're like, go away, come back with another appraisal. You need to have better data. And so that is something when agents are putting in data into MLS, if they can include information like that and the concessions, boy, that just helps our life and makes the process move that much faster instead of having to track down all this information. So if it's there, I don't have to track you down and you're in the middle of showing a house and I'm blowing up your phone or sending you texts and things like that, right?
Yeah.
It's just another thing that can help smooth that process, make it go faster.
Yeah, I think, like you said, being upfront about those disclosures, letting you know what you're going to walk into, anything you can do that helps saves time in the long run, because this stuff's going to come up, at some point in the process anyway. Might as well be
Exactly.
upfront with it, from the beginning.
Yep, completely agree. Let us know what we're walking into. If we're walking into a tough one, we're fine dealing with tough ones. That's part of our job, right? But help us understand why this one is where it is. And both sides, both listing and buyer's agent. I talk to both sides.
Yeah, that's great to know. And then what about for the consumer side, for the home seller, the home buyer? What should we kind of keep in mind? How can we prepare to go through this process to work with our, appraisers? What do we need to know from a consumer side of things?
From the consumer side of things, especially if it's an FHA, understanding what those guidelines are, the chipping and peeling paint, things like that we're going to have to check. And it's not our fault. I try to let all the homeowners know this is something. Anytime the government gets involved, they're going to want to see certain things. The handrails, if it's more than 3 steps, if you have a porch that's more than 18 inches, it's going to have a rail around it. The water heater, it's got to have the expansion valve to no more than 6 inches above. That probably takes care of 95% of our work orders, to be perfectly honest, those 5 or 6 things. So if they're doing an FHA, that is by far the best thing. When I'm doing an appraisal, even for a purchase, I love it when the homeowner's there, to be perfectly honest, because who's the best person that knows that house the best? They are. If the agent didn't ask the question or didn't get put in MLS about some particular updates or something like that, that homeowner is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to that house. They're the expert at that point. So I love it when they're there. I don't mind. A lot of agents like to think that appraisers want to go through homes by themselves, but if they're there, I love asking them questions.
Yeah, like you said, I can imagine that'd be very beneficial, to say, like, instead of going back and forth on a million questions, being able to ask, your question right there, saying, hey, when was this done? Or what's the deal with this? Or how to fix that. I think that's really, beneficial. So if you are getting ready to sell, make sure, hang around when your appraiser's there, see if they have any questions or walk through with them. Sounds like that'd be very, very beneficial. And you mentioned kind of some of the things, that you just said, hey, this comes up a lot, or, this is what I'm noticing. When anything else that potential home sellers can do to get their home ready, or any here's the top couple things I'm seeing for this, or that can really speed up that process before you enter into it.
Those are probably the main things. And it all depends on a price point, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're in that FHA range, that first time home buyer type situation, by far, most likely you're going to end up with an FHA loan, or a higher percentage chance, I should say. So those are definitely things to be aware of. having access to certain areas, making sure we can get to a scuttle if we need to put a camera up there, poke our head up into the attic, things like that, just making sure we have access to the entire property at that point. I would say those are by far the most important things for us.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Best bits of advice for working with your appraiser. I know we covered a lot, but give us, kind of one wrap up summary for our realtors, one wrap up summary for our consumers on what you would advise, your clients to do when they're working with you all.
One word's communication.
Yeah.
I think that's been harped on or talked about quite a bit, right? We need communication. Our entire business revolves around data. And if the data isn't in MLS, we have to go find it. And that means talking to people. So communication by far is the most important thing. Let your appraiser know about certain issues that might come up, why a property might be a difficult one, how they priced it, things like that. That is by far the most important thing. For consumers out there, I would say something to be aware of, because Fannie and Freddie are giving out so many property inspection waivers. Now they're calling it value acceptance, so where a purchase may not even need an appraisal. They still may want to get an appraisal just to make sure that the value is where they've decided to purchase, right? It's insurance at that point, that you can kind of look at it that way. And I would advise even agents because they also have financial fiduciary duty to their clients. So if they're going through and just trying to push a deal through, be careful. Make sure you're talking to your clients. Make sure that they understand that they're not going to be getting the appraisal, that piece of insurance that says, this property really is what it's worth, what I'm paying for it. I think that's important to do as well. And just for, like I was saying, agents to understand that they might be putting themselves at risk too, if in the future, we have another recession when values start coming down and people start looking for money in the court system, unfortunately, because that's what happens. And they're going to come back and say, well, we didn't get an appraisal in this particular, my agent said it was worth it. And then they're going to be, it's going to be on them at that point, and they're not going to have that appraisal to help back them up.
Well, great bits of advice, all stuff to keep in mind if you're selling or buying a house, if you're a realtor, always keep this in mind. And I think, ultimately, as you mentioned, we're here to work together. We're here to get a deal done. And, the best way to do that is through communication and through supporting each other. And, this was great, Ron. I want to thank you so much for coming on, for sharing a little bit more into your world and what you all do there. And I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time and insights.
Thanks, Allison. Love to come back anytime.
And to all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.